Steph or Stephen, can you confirm when you can see it?
Just trying to check now.
Thank you.
Yeah, it looks live now.
Thanks, Steph.
Thanks.
Hello, kia ora koutou everyone, and welcome along to a meeting of Selwyn District Council on the 13th of May 2020, held via Zoom. Good to be together again, and I'll just start with the council affirmation and karakia. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions, so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of Selwyn District and its communities. We will. Karakia, whakatake ki te uru, whakatake ki te tonga, kia mākina ki ngā kūta, kia mātaratara ki tai, e hi ake nā te atukura, he hio, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. So again, welcome along. We've got an apology from Councillor Miller today. Someone moved that we accept that apology. Councillor Alexander, seconded Councillor Lyle. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Unanimously accepted. Declare it carried. Identification of any extraordinary general business today? None that I've been made aware of. No. Any conflicts of interest that aren't already on the interest register? None. And actually, just under those apologies, I just noticed there's a couple of accounts. Deborah's not with us, so we just note her for lateness. And I think that's it. So we'll just think the inclusion of Deborah there. We come to a public forum, and it's great today to have Area Commander Inspector Peter Cooper with us. Peter, thank you for joining in and making yourself available to give a bit of an update on where things are at in Selwyn, how policing has been for you and your team over the last few weeks. Obviously, a very different style of policing required, and yeah, we're keen to hear from you. So you want to turn your video on, and I'll hand over to you to give us an update. Thank you.
Hi Sam, thank you. Can I just test that you can hear me? I'm trying one of these headset things and I'm not very good at them.
We can, you sound great.
Thank you. Must be a very good microphone if I sound great, but I appreciate that. Yeah, I just thought I'd give a very brief sort of overview of where we are as we come out level 2, into level 2, I should say, and out of what has been an extraordinary time for us all, particularly in policing. We used to be in the lead agencies in many emergencies, and when everything goes wrong, we're used to that lead role. This one's been very different for us, and it is a health-led emergency scenario, and we work for health, and I think that sort of changes our way of thinking a little bit. And I think it's been challenging for us, but it's been very good for us too, in that policing's an organisation of a lot of doers, and we often push forward for things to happen quickly. And I think it's good that we've learned some lessons out of these last few weeks around patience and listening to others and playing more in the field that health play in has been enlightening to us. So that's the sort of thing we've been dealing with through the period. Our biggest concern, I guess, as we've gone through this period is we've become the face of the breacher, the person who breaches the conditions. And Canterbury seem to be very, very good at dobbing each other in when it comes to breaching conditions under the COVID alert status. We lead the country in the number of people that we've had to follow up. As an example, over the weekend, there were 1,080 calls for breaches in Canterbury, which was 400 more than Auckland district. So we certainly have that going in our community. We're certainly pretty vigilant, it would appear, on what people are and aren't doing. So look, we've been through some difficult times. We've had to put ourselves in positions for dealing with members of the community who aren't used to being involved with police at all, in an environment where we've had to take the the heavy hand sometimes and prosecute people for breaches and deal with parts of the community that don't normally see police. So again, an interesting time and a challenging time, but we are very much looking forward to level 2 and the freedoms that it will bring to the community. We're very mindful we continue to have a role when we go to level 2, and we will be working through the conditions of what it means in the next 24 hours as the law is being reviewed about what can our powers become during that period, and we'll watch and take our lead from the national on what that will be. But we're hopeful that we'll be able to take more of a back seat and get back to what we do best, which is law and order policing. So in that space, law and order wise, the demand for our service through March and April has completely changed. We have had a significant drop off in crime. We've been in a position where our demand, in the what we call volume kinds of crime, thefts, burglaries, and such like, has virtually disappeared. And that can be a good symptom of everyone being at home looking after their own equipment in their own houses better than anything. So guardianship around our own belongings has been really strong. So that's dropped away. We have anticipated some mental health issues to come out of this lockdown period and some family harm issues as well. At the moment, our trend on family harm hasn't gone up like we anticipated it could do. We think a lot of that is around the fact that the perpetrator and the victim, for lack of better language, are still in the same house and haven't been able to separate. So we will wait with interest as we move into more freedoms to see what actually has occurred during that lockdown period and what we may be seeing in the home environment as people are able to more report. So we will wait with bated breath to see what that brings us. Their suicide rate and attempted suicide rate is nothing to be proud of in Canterbury generally, but in the last few weeks it has increased significantly. And we expect we will see more of that, unfortunately, as the stresses and strains of the changing environment and economics start to have an effect. So sadly, we expect we'll see a lot more of that going forward. As we move out of this and into the alcohol service providers opening in a week's time, that will also be challenging for us, because we'll not only be policing alcohol and all of its bits and pieces, but we'll also be doing social distancing in numbers, and we are not sure what that will look like going forward. We'll wait and see as we work through that over the next week about what will actually be required to do in that space. We're very mindful that economics, when it's good and everyone's employed, has a positive effect on crime and our workloads, and the vice versa occurs when the economic conditions change and worsen. And with a predicted unemployment rate that hasn't been seen for many decades, being the worst case scenario, we expect that we will have a significant workload as 2020 continues to unfold. So a lot of our planning is around what we're going to do and how we're going to react and how we're going to change our policing to meet the post-COVID environment and what that means for all of us around the country. In the rural sector, we're thinking that we're going to see a stronger recovery, we hope, with New Zealand being a strong agricultural country and a lot of work on the farms has just continued. We are confident that our rural sector may be the ones who lead us out of some of this economic gloom, and so we are positive in that space. We're also very aware that people's movements and changing habits, we have, particularly around our satellite towns of Rolleston, Lincoln, a lot of people travel into town for work. That work may no longer be there, so we could be looking at a changing environment in the townships in Selwyn, where we have more and more people at home and more children, teenagers, high school kids perhaps no longer going to school in private schools in Christchurch. It may not be an option for some families going forward, and they may find themselves in the Selwyn district schools. So we expect the change environment, a change of population could be on the cards here. And I guess the last thing I think I just talk a lot of gloom and doom there. I think there's also a lot of opportunity post-COVID for the rural environment. Selwyn has, in my humble little opinion, an opportunity here to capture some of those opportunities where people are no longer so keen to go into Christchurch, so keen to be in an environment where they're in a city, and there is a real time here, I think, a short window where they could be encouraged, services provided in the Selwyn district could grow and meet that demand where people are no longer so keen to travel. And we haven't got that tourist market like we've enjoyed for so many years. So perhaps there is that opportunity there for the economy in the region of Selwyn to really take off. And I use this when I talk to people around Selwyn district is time to make Selwyn your home, and that commuter traffic we have into Christchurch and that lovely southern motorway it's about to be finished. It would be great from the community's point of view to see a lot more happening within Selwyn itself. So that's me. Sam, if there's questions, happy to do my best on those as well.
Thanks, Peter. And yeah, that's certainly the feedback we've had from our community engagement so far, is that people value the space and the sparse population, and yeah, not being so tight to one another has certainly been feedback to us. Just a question on the reporting that you had earlier at the start of your presentation. Were the matters that were brought to your attention breaches, or were they people just being vigilant about suspected things that they just wanted the police to look into? Is it more a reflection of the fact that we're well connected and we see, because we want to be connected to our neighbours and what's going on, we've got a close knit community, and so there's a care and concern factor there, or were there just a whole lot of breaches that people were letting you know about?
I'd like to say it was mainly people being very highly vigilant and just trying to do the right thing, but I think a lot of it also that when we go through the numbers is people being hyper vigilant, and maybe just even a little bit of fear in that too earlier on, that my neighbours had 2 or 3 cars come to his address, there must be something going on, and they're often 9 times out of 10 when we go back, check these, make phone calls, they're just people within a bubble doing what they're allowed to do. It's the perception versus reality thing you get when these things happen. And for an example, a lot of street parties, people deciding to congregate at the end of a street in their own little bubbles and have what is a natural social gathering. We've got a lot of those reports that people are breaching bubbles, and truly they're not. They're just trying to stay connected.
Thank you for that. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. You say there's been a lot lower crime, but the perception in our community there's been a lot more relatively minor interference with vehicles, vehicle theft in the neighbourhood. Whether that's, can you comment whether that's just perception or that's actually the level of sort of those what might be considered minor, but to each and every person that's more than minor crime?
Mark, I think there's a couple of things in that people often communicate between themselves, particularly on community pages on Facebook, and report everything and anything. And the reality of that versus the reality of what we see here are two very marked different things. We do look at the Selwyn page and all the other pages around, and they are unusual places sometimes. There's all sorts of stuff gets talked about in there that really isn't the reality of it. And look, I know it sounds terrible for me to say this, but some of the reports we've had have been the likes of 6 goldfish stolen from a pond at the back of your property. I'd say that's probably the neighbour's cat, but that becomes, in our world, becomes a burglary. And that's the sort of some of the stuff we've been dealing with, quite minor petty crime. I think earlier on, just to quickly cover that, Mark, a lot of people pushed their cars out into the driveway so they could use their garage for other activities, but didn't take anything out of that car and made a target of it. So the criminal element's a criminal element, and they will make advantage of that. I don't know that we've actually seen a lot of what we would call volume crime come through, and thefts from houses and such like, as guardianship's been pretty good.
Thank you. Councillor Epaha.
Kia ora. Tēnā koe, Peter. Thank you very much for your report. Mine is just really to pass on comments from the community. I'm the councillor for the Ellesmere district, Ellesmere ward. And just with regards to one farm in particular that had some concerns around movements throughout this area, Taumotu there, and through the quick actions of Al Lornan, the great team there, and yourselves, his concerns were raised, but also addressed, and he had only good things to say about the service that he received over that period. So thank you very much.
Are there any further questions or comments from
Oh,
councillors?
it's great to hear. Good to hear positive stories. Thank you.
Great.
Kia
Well,
ora.
thank you, Pete. Thank you, Peter, for that update. Really good to have you here, and please pass on our thanks to your staff for what they've done through lockdown and what they're going to continue to do as we see things opening up tomorrow and over the coming weeks ahead. So cheers for joining us, and have a good afternoon.
You're welcome. Thanks for the invitation.
Councillors, the next item on the agenda is pages 12 through 25, and it's the minutes of the meeting held via Zoom on the 22nd of April. Do I have a mover and a seconder that those be recorded as true and accurate? Lyle Alexander. Is there any discussion on those minutes?
Yeah, I did pass on a minor correction to today's Mr. Mayor. Nothing that really needs discussion.
Thank you. All those in favour that they be recorded as true and accurate, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Declare it carried. Current matters requiring attention. There are two. One's on hold and the other's to be reported back on the 27th of May. My report for today, there's two things I'd like to cover. One is the feedback that we're giving to community engagement work. There were over 80 people from business, schools, volunteer organisations, the police, youth council we talked to, and the feedback that we're giving to them about the 5 sort of major areas that we heard come back from the community around the well-beings. And so I'm just going to share that with you and those that are watching now. So around cultural well-being, some of the key messages with it, mana whenua are very well connected and care about what's going on. Volunteering across our community is strong. The strength in the new residents, and we know a number of people have moved here very recently. We've got good local networks of volunteer organisations, the clubs and sports have mean that we're in good stead as far as connection goes. And there's a strong rural advantage, and I mentioned that around just the space that we've got and the feeling of space, and even in our townships we don't have the high density of living that a lot of places do. Around environmental wellbeing, some of the key feedback was around the natural environment is certainly outstanding. That tracks and trails have been well used, and even footpaths just around the block have been very well used. So the opportunity around the further promotion of those. The recycling going to landfill for a time was certainly seen as something that needs to be avoided in the future, and looking at ways, and it's really about product stewardship, but also understanding the processes that go on to ensure that recycling can continue, and that there's an opportunity to reduce our carbon emissions in the recovery. And the government's been strong on saying that's where they would like to see some of their money go. Around economic wellbeing, the promotion of local spending and leisure, so that people do stay local. And the opportunity to be able to attract people to sell and to spend those dollars as well. People able to enjoy working from home, and while working from home doesn't work for everyone, a lot of people have actually found the change that there are some other opportunities, that time being freed up, extra time with family, and a number of tasks that don't need to be done in an office environment, and equally some that really do need to be, and others looking forward to getting back into that space. Businesses that really care about their staff, and there was very strong feedback actually from the business community that we talked to, doing the best that they can with the wage subsidy that was provided to ensure that staff are well looked after. Leaning on our reliance on agriculture, and that has obviously been a mainstay of our economy for a long time, and comparative to other industries is less affected. And the university at Lincoln is a real jewel for us. We need to look after it, and we need to ensure its continuation, and increasing roll numbers and all that will help as well. Social wellbeing, and Peter Cooper mentioned some of this. people say they're okay, but are they actually okay? And it's hard to get a feel for that when interaction is just via electronic means. We don't expect everything to go back to the way that they were. So again, picking up on what are the things that need to be left behind and what are the new opportunities going forward. Loneliness is an issue for many people, and that was an issue before the current situation. Isolation sometimes by geography and other times by friendship and just people feeling trapped in their homes is certainly an issue. The financial stress is apparent and growing, and we're going to continue to see that to grow as things evolve in our economy, and that there's a particular opportunity to learn new things and to do things differently in the current space. And some key messages that were heard to think about how we might transition to better is around promoting local businesses, promoting Selwyn so that visitors come here, build on the natural advantages and landscapes that we have. The idea of a recovery hub and a place in Selwyn that people can call into. There's already been the 0800 Selwyn line, and so thinking about how that could be set up. Focus on upskilling with MSD. So it's not just about people losing their jobs, but it'll be about transition into new jobs and the opportunity to train. Selwyn has traditionally been a place that startups can thrive and people setting up their own business, and we've got a lot of self-employed people here. So how could we build on that advantage? And a question really around, can the district plan open up more opportunities for development than what were thought about in a pre-COVID situation? So that's the feedback. Some of the questions being asked. It's not all up to us as a council to answer those things. It's up to us as a community to think about how we all play our part. And the feedback to those that took part, we'll be asking them what is their position and what is their ability to be able to influence some of those outcomes for Selwyn in the long term. The other piece of information that I'd like to share is around the Infometrics reports that we have received. So just looking at page so we received an Infometrics report on the Selwyn economy and looking at what the effects of COVID are going to be in the medium to long term for Selwyn. There were a number of indicators in here that paint it's not a great picture around how we're sitting in Selwyn, but we're certainly in a better position than most of the rest of the country. And this report will be made available on the council website, and also looking forward to hosting a webinar where members of our community, members of our businesses, and the business community as well will be able to have interaction with Infometrics and ask some of the questions that are pertinent to them so that we can share this with the community and maximise the benefit of it. So just a few key stats that have come out of it. Firstly, 78% of the workforce is estimated to be working through level 3. So there has been some good activity through level 3, which is good. Page 12, the projections are that Selwyn's economy is going to contract by 5.4%. The national economy at about 8%, so the contraction's not good for us, but not as bad as some of the rest of the country, which is pleasing. When we look at industries that are going to take the biggest hits, construction, professional and scientific and technical services being the highest hit, and those that either won't be or will see some growth through this process is agriculture, forestry, fishing, financial and insurance services, and food processing and manufacturing. In the report, page 21 looks at job losses, and our unemployment rate is set at about 2% over a number of years, 2.2, just above that. Looking to see that rise is the projection to perhaps 7%, which is a large increase from where we're at, but below the national unemployment rate of 9% over the next wee while. And if we look at the jobs and the spaces where that is most likely to affect us, again, construction, number of jobs, at risk there, accommodation and food services, retail and wholesale trade. And then those places where the opportunities are, financial and insurance services, food processing and manufacturing. And then the conversations we just had with those from Infometrics, agriculture and food production was certainly seen as another place as well. So two pieces of work that have sort of been ongoing for the last couple of weeks, and it's pleasing to be able to report those to you. As I said, they will be shared on our website, and with the Infometrics report, we'll be looking to put that into a webinar form and share that with all of our community. Happy to take any questions on any of those, any of that work, and any of the specifics around what we'll be doing as an organisation will be covered by David in his report. Are there any questions for anyone? Councillor McInnes.
Just a quick question. Do we have any idea how long it'll be before the report's up or the webinar would likely to happen? Because I'm sure there's a few people wanting to use it in funding applications, for instance.
David?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Sophie, first answer to your first question will be within the next 24 hours. And the answer to the second question is tomorrow morning. One of the things I'm tasked for is to talk to the two presenters just to check their diary and availability, but I'm thinking within the next 7 to 10 days. That's certainly what we're hopeful of anyway.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Epeha.
My apologies, I haven't put my hand down. Carry on.
No worries. I'll just invite Al Lorne, our recovery manager, to be able to share with you now things that have been going on in the emergency space. Al, if you'd like to turn on your camera and your microphone, and would love to hear from you now. We might come back to Al. So I'll move my report. If someone would like to second that. Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. All those in favour, please raise your hands. And it's unanimous, declare it carried. And I'll hand to David. And David, maybe at the end of your report, you include Al Lorne in your report.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon, everybody. Just want to start with a bit of good news. The Prime Minister again announced today that there were 0 new cases of COVID. So that's good, that it's good news. Look, I just want to start off by acknowledging the efforts of our staff over the 6-week period of lockdown, the manner that they have responded to the needs of the community, and also the effort that's been put into preparedness for level 2 that we move in tomorrow. And what I thought I would do today for the benefit of those who are on the live stream is just talk about the council services coming back on stream. So firstly, our Rolleston headquarters will reopen tomorrow morning and will resume normal business hours Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5 o'clock. The Selwyn libraries will also reopen from Thursday, albeit initially with reduced hours. Most of the library programs won't be operating in the first few days, but certainly return slots will be open, so you will be able to return your books. Selwyn Aquatic Centre reopens tomorrow, Thursday, again with reduced hours initially and with limited programs, initially just for adult lane swimming and for aqua jogging. From Monday of next week, the 18th of May, those programs will be extended to include modified aqua fitness and higher level learn to swim programs. So if you're involved in those programs, please make sure that you either check the website or contact the Aquatic Centre. Community and recreation centres will reopen on Thursday, also with reduced hours, and the fitness programs will reduce gradually from May the 18th, next Monday. Our parks, reserves and playgrounds are all available for use from Thursday, but one request of users is to ensure that you practice safe distancing. And also if you're using playground equipment, you are encouraged to wash or sanitise your hands before and after use. Building consent processing and building inspections will resume as per normal, and customers planning to visit our offices or service centres just asked to note that the numbers of people entering the buildings may be limited, and this of course is in the promotion of social distancing, and also visitors will be required to sign in for contact tracing purposes. So looking good, and obviously in 2 weeks' time, when we again have level 2 reviewed, we will be reviewing some of those hours and some of those restrictions that are placed on our facilities. So happy to answer any questions about that or other related matters, but just while councillors are thinking of those questions, Al, if you're available, can you now jump onto the microphone, please?
Thanks, David. Just a very quick update from me in relation to what we're doing at the moment. So we're working with the with group and with central government about what a level 2 looks like for us in the CDM centre in our space. So we are still doing response We are still looking at for the lead from government about what the central government agencies are going to do in the space, and they're still working that out. So we are still in welfare. We're still answering the 0800 number via our call centre. We are still responding to needs as they come through. Having said that, we have not had a lot of phone calls for help coming through, which has flummoxed us a bit. But I suppose I said last time I spoke that we have put that down to our local communities doing what they do well, and that is looking after each other. And I also want to say that we have been supplying food to our food banks, buying the food for them so that they continue to do the work which they've already been done. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and looking forward, we're just finding out how that will work going in the next month, etc. We're also keeping an eye on the response going forward and the possibility of a second wave. That's our job. We hope for the best and plan for the worst. But as you have seen in other countries, second waves have happened. We really, it's a small thing that could happen, but if we do not take level 2 seriously, there is a possibility that we have a second wave. And I just reiterate what David said about distancing, etc. It's really, really important that people take that seriously. So we're also making sure that we have the ability to stand up if something does happen, another event, or this does flare up. Finally, I just reiterate what the Prime Minister keeps saying is be kind, and my other thing is stay the distance, and both meanings of that. Happy to have any questions, but things are going pretty well. I'm very, very pleased with our team here and our community who just absolutely astound me with the way they continue to look after each other.
Great, thanks, Sal, for that report, and really pleasing to hear that the strength in the community is something that we're able to support, and this isn't about setting anything new up or taking over. It's about some of the key day-to-day things and connections that we already have just being amplified to deliver in a time of need. So thank you for that report, and there are no questions from councillors. Before we come to the end of David's report, I'd just like to also acknowledge David for an award that you recently received. The Society of Local Government Managers is the grouping of council workers right across New Zealand, and the president of that group has awarded our CEO, David Ward, the Distinguished Contribution to Solgum award this year. David's given a really long-term service to Solgum. He's chaired important working groups, including the Democracy and Governance and also the Finance Working Party. David, you've got a track record of being able to lift other people up, mentoring others, and you've seen a number of the people that have worked underneath you become CEOs themselves elsewhere. So it's great to have you re-employed with us, and the confirmation of your contract with us for another 3 years, and to have that also seen and recognised externally just shows the level of contribution that you give not only us but local government New Zealand. So thank you for that, and we look forward to you continuing in that service to come. So just a round of applause there for David. Done. Are there any questions on his report? There being none, is there a mover and a seconder? Moved Gland, seconded Mugford. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Declare it unanimously carried. We come now to item number 3, which is on pages 26 through 37. It's the Cyclone Limited Statement of Intent. David.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And firstly, look, thank you very much for those kind words. It was very humbling to receive that award. I've been involved in local government for almost 30 years now, and it's a wonderful sector to be involved in, and yeah, really proud to be acknowledged and to receive that award. So thank you very much. This report is to receive the CYCON Statement of Intent. Statement of Intents, of course, are a statutory requirement, and they cover a 3-year financial period. and they've got to be adopted by each council who has a CCO prior to the 30th of June, so that we can start the financial year with the SOI intact. Contents of the statements of intent include reference to the objectives and philosophies of a company, the role and responsibility of board of directors, safety of people working within the organisation and key stakeholders, financial projections for a 3-year period, incorporating a dividend policy, a reference to the company's strategic direction, and some KPIs specifically for the year ahead. The document in front of you, councillors, has been put together following a series of discussions at high level between myself and key staff, the Mayor, the Chair of Audit, and the CE of SciCon Limited and their Chair. The SOI follows similar formats as previous years. The key things you'll note in there, of course, are the enhanced reporting requirements, which see the Chair of the company and the Chief Executive addressing Council on a quarterly basis. The impact of COVID-19 is noted both in my covering report and also within the content of the statement of intent. I have been asked about specific reference to the impact of Three Waters. I personally believe that the company will benefit as a result of the Three Waters proposals, but the reason we haven't specifically referred to it is there is no clear direction out of central government yet as to what those roles and requirements will be. But as a quality performer in the Three Waters sector, I have no doubt that, as I say, SciCon will benefit. And I guess as the sole shareholder of SciCon, we have a vested interest in not only actively promoting the company and creating opportunities for its success, because when the company is successful, council and its ratepayers benefit, Mr. Mayor, in many ways. Happy to answer questions with respect to the content of the SOI or the process itself.
Great. Well, it's moved by Councillor Murray Lemon and seconded by Nicole Reid. Councillor and Murray, is there anything you'd like to say around the SOI?
Thanks, Sam. No, nothing really to add to David's, just Pip's reference there to their operation under COVID, like many companies having to adapt to that, but also that those practices have come out of that they will continue in the future, just as good health measures for their workforce and those that they interact with. So it's one of those very difficult to do an SOI in this current situation, but I think it's as good as we can get as a projection as to where they sit and where they project to go. So happy to have moved.
Great, thank you. Any questions on the SOI? There being none, all those in favour, please raise your hands and declare it unanimously carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 4, pages 38 through 42. It's a joint licensing committee, and invite Malcolm Johnson to present the report to us now. Malcolm, welcome to the meeting.
Good afternoon all. Can you hear me all right, Sam?
We can hear you, we can't see you. Yep.
Okay, I've got a big red cross on my video and I'm clicking on it, but it's not.
That's all right, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Sweet. Look, I'll just take my report as read. I can say that I've spoken to a number of licensees over the last couple of days, and there's a lot of excitement there. There's a lot that are really keen to get back to work. So they're looking forward to tomorrow, and it's for meals only for the first week. After that, it'll be as per normal. So yeah, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. Malcolm, are you expecting any issues with the social distancing requirements of the level 2 regulations in the first week with restaurants and then subsequent weeks with bars and restaurants?
Yes, I think the this next week will probably give us a better picture as to what we can expect in that regard. I'm not expecting too many problems. I think everybody after the last 7 weeks get the picture. So I don't think we'll have too many problems, but I guess this next week will tell going forward.
Thank you. Mover and seconder. Councillor Lyle, seconded Bland. And all those in favour, please raise your hands. Great, that we received the report is unanimously carried. Thanks, Malcolm, for that and bringing it to us. And it's great to hear that excitement that's there. I know a lot of our community is feeling that. We just, as Al said, we've got to remember to stay safe, but it's good to get that activity happening and also the social benefits of being able to meet one another again. So thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Item number 5 is the Chief Executive annual reports for the Selwyn Waihora zone committees and Christchurch West Melton zone committees. And the motion is that we receive these reports. There's a mover and a seconder that we do that. Councillor Alexander, seconded Mugfidge. David, is there anything you want to say to these?
Happy to answer questions, but just taking the reports as read, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any questions from councillors or would the members on those committees like to say anything? No. All those in favour that we receive the reports, please raise your hand. Declare it unanimously carried. Item number 6 is on pages 51 through 72, Asset Manager Water Services. There's a number of recommendations here. A is adopt the purposes for public consultation, the statement of proposal in relation to the proposed closures of one length of water race. And the next one is a water race. And the next thing is about public notice, intention to close water race. And it's all about the water races. So if I could invite Murray England and Murray Washington's team to be able to talk us through this report. And then we'll have a mover and a seconder. Thanks, Murray.
Awesome. Can everybody hear me?
We can't see you though. Yep.
No, well, that's not a bad thing. And I might try and share my screen if that's coming up. Can everyone see the screen?
We can see ourselves on your screen.
That's a bit not helpful, isn't it? There we go. How's that?
We've got the agenda now.
Perfect. All right. So, so my reports start on page 51.
Yes.
Which is supposed to work for me. 51. There we go. And so Sam's read out the recommendation. There's 2 water race reports that I'm putting forward. The first one is it's actually a council initiated closure, and it's for a couple of roundabouts we're looking at constructing, the roading team. I might start my video. There we go. And the water race closures will help with that. So this is not asking council to approve the closures. It's purely asking council to allow staff to go out to consultation on that matter. In the recommendation, you'll see here under part D, there's councillors X and Y. So we're looking for 2 councillors who can help us form a subcommittee to hear any submissions that we receive on our consultation. So perhaps I'll just go through to page 70. That's going to work. So there's 2 closures. One's on Blakes Road, and that's shown here, starting from the red spot. We'll basically divert the race at this point down this blue race to its termination and close it at this point. And then the race from the red through to the blue will be closed. Likewise, over the page, this is Marshes Road. And this is actually on Christchurch City Council's side of the boundary, but it's still a race that council maintains and operates. So terminating it at the motorway junction, this is the new motorway comes through, and closing it through to the blue point here. So that's the first closure, and perhaps I will go back to the recommendation. So it takes me back through there. Yeah, so I'll take any questions. I suppose one key thing actually before I go to questions would be that some of the comments come up is this a strategic race? And so we have our strategic races shown here. And the one down Marshes Road is this race, which is not a strategic race. And the one on Blakes Road, and I can always get this wrong, but it's around here, but it's not one of our strategic races either. So there's no issues or clashes with that.
Thanks, Murray. I've got a couple of questions from Councillor Alexander and then Councillor Epeha.
Thank you. I'd say a comment on page 53 where it talks about channels being remained open for the purpose of stormwater and drainage. rather than it as a water race. I'm just wondering about the consenting of things. When it's carrying water race, it's essentially a conduit of water to stock and some irrigation. When it's stormwater and drainage, it's carrying a higher contaminant load, and when it gets to the ultimate termination, is that going to be more of an issue, the repurposing of a water race from water race to stormwater and drainage?
Yeah, so the primary purpose of water races obviously is to convey water for stock water. In large storm events, they do carry overland flow as well, although it's not intended to do that. That's what they do. And so we often do recommend that races stay open to help alleviate that sort of flooding type thing. So for that reason, we would keep it open. But I do agree, you don't necessarily want any sort of industrial discharges or anything like that into the water races. So they do enough in sensitive environments. But generally speaking, we do like to keep them open to convey the overland flow in the future. And with the races being dry, they could be repurposed into a treatment system. You could plant them out if you wanted to, make it more of a swale type system. So that's how we would envision it in for this particular closure.
So if a follow-on question, if I may, then would be who's funding the conversion from a dry water race to a planted stormwater drain? Is that coming out of the district stormwater budget, or where's the funding for that conversion?
Yeah, so generally these generally races are on private property, so we're the responsibility of the property owner to manage them and look after them in the future when they change from a water race to a stormwater purpose. In this case, the two roundabouts, if they are used for discharging stormwater from those new formations, then it would be council and that roading budget that would to work that through. But there are options for stormwater at both those sites. The one is to the old water race channel once it's closed. Some sites will allow it to go to ground as well. So for this case, it would probably be the council and the roading budget that would fund that, but generally speaking, it would be the property owner if they want to keep it open for that purpose.
Thank you. And Councillor Epeha.
Thank you, Murray. I was just about to type something down to say that my questions have all been answered, but as a new councillor, I was just wondering if you could run through closures for me or for us, just a quick overview of why, please.
Yep, no, happy to. I'll do it quickly. So there's two types of closures. One type is council-initiated closures, which we're talking about here. That can be done for a range of reasons, but in this case, it's because it helps with a roading upgrade project. The second type is public-initiated closures. So that's people who have had water races, they've used them for stock water perhaps in the past, but of changing the circumstances, maybe joining an irrigation scheme, converting to dairy, or whatever the case may be, they may no longer require those races. So we have public initiated closures where people come to council saying, we'd like this race to be closed. They generally come through with signed forms from all the downstream users saying that they're happy for the race to be closed, and then that will come through to council for consideration. So the next report we talk to is a ratepayer initiated closure. So there's a number of closures where ratepayers have come together saying we no longer need this as a facility or a service, and we'd like to close it. So I suppose the benefit is for a dairy farmer, a race at the moment, you'd have to bridge for your centre pivots. The dairy cows don't drink from the water race, they have their own trough water. And so it's a cost to them that they don't necessarily get any benefit from. So that's what's driving that closure.
Good, Murray. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hassan.
Right, can you all hear me? I did send an email out, and Nicole, you and I are on the same page. Thanks, Murray, for answering some of the questions. I think there needs to be an understanding that the last time I think we looked at the strategic report that you've referred to might be 2012, which is a long time ago. And with regards to some of our reasoning around that policy, I think it'd be fair to say that there's been a big climate change shift, and hopefully that climate change shift that our chief executive talks about has actually filtering down through our council with regards to a holistic view on where we actually sit with our water races. And and strategically looking forward, you know, into the future. I'm pleased that Murray has actually looked at these as a possible stormwater retention basin area open. On another matter, piping water races where you don't let the sunlight in is actually not good for the water resource coming out the other end, especially if E. coli, Giardia, etc. get into the system at the beginning. And we highlighted that one with regards to the Rolleston Dog Park. So understanding the environmental consequences of this policy sometimes need to be updated. And that's where I was coming from with regards to, if you're going to have these closures, look at them from an environmental perspective and not from one of convenience going forward. That's my comment. I'll let it go through the process, but I think the whole policy regime of who we consult, how we consult, involving the water zone committees, attitudes in the last 8 years have definitely changed in favour of climate change. Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. So the discussion for today is around going through the process that we currently have, and the matters that you're raising are important for us to consider, but aren't really for consideration under the current framework. So do look forward to hearing that feedback from the zone committees and taking that into account. And I know that Murray is involved in those spaces too. So Murray, that isn't something that's new to you, and thank you for your consideration of that in this water race space. Murray has asked if there would be 2 people that would sit as hearings people on to hear the submissions here. Usually we would have 3 people do that. I'm happy that it be 2, but if 3 people were wanting to do it, that can be done as well. Are there any volunteers that would like to sit on the hearings panel?
I'm happy to put my hand up.
Great, Shane and Sophie. And 2 is good if that's who we've got. So we'll add, with the insertion of those 2 names, then we can. Sorry, Shane.
I see Deborah waving too.
Oh, sorry, Deborah. So 3 people. So we've got Deborah and Shane and Sophie. I think that 3 is an appropriate number to have on this panel. So if those 3, with those 3 names inserted, did we have a mover and a seconder earlier? I don't think so. Moved Councillor Reid, seconded Councillor Lemon. All those in favour, please say aye. Or raise your hand, should I say? I can't hear you. Declare that carried unanimously. And Murray, if you'd like to move on to your second report, which is around the private initiated close. All those in favour, please say
Okay, so hopefully that has now come up on the screen again for everyone to see. So this is the second water race closure report, and this is a ratepayer initiated closure. So there's 4 closures proposed, 3 in the Paparua water race scheme area and 1 in the Ellesmere. So this is on page 73, and I'll just jump through to page 86 for a minute. So one row closure on Hoskins Row, which is shown by this purple line coming through here. So there's only 1 property owner affected on that one. And this is to allow the extension of the iPort, the iZone sort of industrial area. The next one down is in off Weddens Road down by Lincoln. And funny, it's not actually shown on our on our maps, but there is sort of an old historic channel which came through here. This has been dry for quite some time, a number of years, and so it's more of a procedural thing just to close that and to take this off the rates off that property. Third one's Waterholes Road, and there's a number of properties here that are affected. We have had notice from this first property, which I'm circling here, who may want to keep the water race open, and if that's the case, then the race will be shut just at the boundary of that property. And then the last but not least is in the Ellesmere area, and there's a number of properties affected by this closure. All property owners have signed the forms wanting the race to be closed. And as we talked before, none of these races are strategic races that we've identified. This race has been closed for quite some time, so there's no ecological effects to closing that race at all. Happy to take questions.
Great. Councillor Hassan, you got another question, please?
Look, just with regards to the water race closure on Whedon's Road, if we could go back to the map.
Yep, that one there.
That one going through Whedon's Road. Does that not connect through to a land drainage system with regards to the spring flow on the left-hand side of the screen?
Yeah, it does. So this race, it comes down Whedon's Road and it terminates here. This land here is owned by the university, and this one here is being developed currently at the moment. So this portion of the race has been out of action for quite some time, and then sort of a residual race has been through here. So no water has flown down here for quite some time. There is actually an alternative and more direct water race which comes down through this part here, and actually links more directly into that waterway. This line here is actually a strategic race, the part in yellow. This part here is not, and I can go back to strategic race to show you that. And one idea is to actually, in fact, change it over to this one to be the strategic race because it more directly affects that waterway.
Okay. Can I just highlight with regards to Ellesmere Junction Road, that is actually the boundary of the spring headworks of the L2 land drainage. It's where the water races actually connect through to the L2 system. Right. There is probably 4 or 5 of them that I could actually tell you about. Some of them have been straightened, as the one that runs down, I think it's called Farm Road that you were looking at, and then goes into what is quite clearly a stream. That is a very important drainage system due to the high flooding that actually happens in that particular area due to the contour of the land. There's also an underground stream that flows through there with regards to this, a large swale that actually fills up with water historically. We do have photographs of all the flooding that occurs in that particular area. I know there's a new subdivision gone in, but the council quite clearly has all the photographs of how important it is to have sufficient stormwater retention basins. And I'm standing up for the L2 here because they have expressed a lot of concern with regards to the volumes of water that they're expected to cater further on down from the lowland farmers with regards to some of these particular interfaces that where the water races connect through. And the reason is that when you've been involved for 30 years with land drainage and lived in the district for 30 years and seen the results, you soon know by local knowledge. So can I suggest, if you haven't done so, that you actually pass this through to the L2 Land Drainage Committee. I'm just expressing real concern about the historical nature of this location, this area, and where that water race actually intersects with regards to the land drainage of the L2 responsibility, please.
Yeah, so I think in terms of these closures, the races that we're looking at closing are in fact already predominantly dry, and so I don't think there's need to talk to the land drainage committees on this particular closure, but where they do interact with the land drainage committees, you're happy to have a chat to them, and perhaps even beforehand, just to talk to them about how they see water races and land drainage interacting. More than happy to do that.
Thank you. And just picking up on Deborah's point before around the strategic water races and their designation, I suppose, and your comment, Murray, that perhaps there needs to be a change on the race to a more southerly race that actually does connect in. Where do you see that sort of decision making happening? Is that as part of the long-term plan, or is there another process that you would suggest we go through to understand that?
Yeah, I imagine that might just be we could probably almost cover that off in a separate report to council and just saying this is the current strategic plan. and we like to change it from this race to this race for this reason, and just get council's adoption of that. It could be part of a future water race closure report, a separate report, or part of our 5 waters report. So I think we'll probably do it before the long-term plan, and we can bring that to council for consideration. It's definitely a council decision.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. If you'd like to just stop screen sharing, just so I can see everyone on the screen as we move through the adoption or otherwise of that. Is there a mover and a seconder for Murray's second report? Moved Councillor Lemon, seconded Councillor Lyle. Is there any further discussion? No. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Declare it unanimously carried. Thank you. And Murray, your third report with us today is the 5 Waters monthly report.
Okay, so I'll just bring up my screen again. That should be coming through. Oops, Daisy, it's all right. Share. Should be coming through now. I'll get rid of the faces. Awesome. So although I'm going to lead you through this, I've also got Elaine, who's our Water Services Delivery Manager, and Murray Washington, the Asset Manager, here as well. And I'll just get them to help fill this report in, because my voice could get a bit boring if you just listen to me for 3 reports running. So the first part is potable water, and we're going to talk about where we're at for our water safety plan. So I'll ask Elaine to have a talk to you about that.
Thank you, Murray. Hi all. So we'll just talk about the water safety plans to start with. I think these were mentioned last month, and as discussed, we're currently in the process of revising the water safety plans across the district. We've now submitted the revised plan for Rolleston to the DHB, with the remaining plans to continue to be submitted throughout May, June and into July. And we'll be working with the DHB to gain approval of all the plans during that time. We had previously asked the DHB for an extension to the submission deadlines due to the implications of the COVID-19 shutdown and the new water safety planning process. However, this wasn't granted by the DHB, so that will speed up the works through the coming months, I think.
Awesome, thank you. And just to say to the team that it's been a huge amount of work. At some stage, we'll share these documents with you, but they're not small. They're hundreds and hundreds of pages long with a lot of detail. So it's been a great job done. I'm going to talk now about demand management, and this is more of an interest fund project, nothing really too serious. But I was just curious to see if the demand for water had changed over the lockdown period. And so the graph that you can see on the screen, hopefully now, in the blue line shows a Thursday pre-level 4 lockdown. And the orange line shows a Thursday post or during the level 4 lockdown. And I think what you can see here is driven by the working people, class people in Rolleston. And so before the lockdown, we had a peak quite earlier on, so the earlier hours of the morning. And with lockdown that peak was delayed until later. So I think people aren't getting up quite so early to commute into town. They're sort of being a little bit leisurely, perhaps not trying to rush the washing through, but put the washing on a bit later. So that's the first one. Also, again, the peak in the evening was more later, sort of around that sort of 7, 8 p.m. at night, whereas that's been flattened right off and the peak comes in a lot earlier. So you're not having to have people travel back from the city to their place of residence, but they're actually working, and a lot of those peaks are buffered, which is quite interesting. I had a question come through earlier in the week just about the volumes of water, and has that changed much? So we haven't seen a great profile change in terms of the amount of water used. I think most of the drop in water we've seen has been because of climatic or seasonal variances. But the profile has definitely changed, and no doubt as we move back into level 2 and level 1, then we'll see more of a regular profile forming again. So it was just an interest piece. We'll now move to temporary chlorination, and Elaine will talk to you about that.
Thanks, Murray. So we did have 3 schemes under temporary chlorination last month. The Curwee scheme to start with, the remediation works that have now been completed. These were in the reticulation network. They were completed on the 1st of May, and chlorination was stopped that day. So that was Friday, the 1st of May. Since then, all the water quality sampling results we've had back have been clear, and there is no longer deemed to be a risk. And so the chlorine residual is now out of the network. So there should be no further works associated with that. West Melton and Dunsandle both still remain under temporary chlorination, with investigation works ongoing there, and both involving third parties, doing some further research into each location. And we should hopefully get the results of those in the coming month, with further infrastructure works may be required at both places. Also just to note, the Upper Selwyn huts, they had a temporary or boil water notice on that has now been lifted, and that was lifted today. That'll kind of follow into Murray's next point about permanent chlorination at Upper Selwyn huts. Thanks, Murray.
Microphone, Murray. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it wasn't me who put me on mute. I think somebody else did that for me. So permanent chlorination, Upper Selwyn huts. So we did have an incident earlier on as part of during the lockdown period of somebody who was tampering with water connections at the huts, which is a really sad thing. Not only because the lockdowns are a stressful enough time for everybody, but for someone to be going around and turning off people's water, cutting into the laterals, it really just is disgusting behaviour. But because of that, we did issue that precautionary boil water notice that Elaine just talked about, just to make sure that people are drinking safe water, because if you do cut into a line, there's a chance of dirt and contamination to enter the pipework at that time. Council made the decision quite some time ago now to look at consulting further on chlorination for Arthur's Pass and Upper Selwyn huts. Arthur's Pass consultation happened late last year, and we have started now the consultation period for Upper Selwyn huts, and this incident sort of brought that to front of mind again. So consultation opened on Monday the 4th of May and will close at 4 p.m. on Friday the 5th of June, and we'll bring back a report to Council hopefully in June, if not the month after, on our recommendation about both those schemes, Arthur's Pass and Upper Selwyn huts. Capital projects, Elaine, did you want to add anything on that?
Thanks, Murray. There's not too much to add here. All projects have now returned to their pre-COVID state. The projects previously in construction are now back in construction, and those in design are still in design. All sites are operating under additional COVID-19 health and safety protocols, with no significant issues of note. The only thing probably to mention is that there could be delays just due to the procurement process, and the impact on that is not fully understood yet.
Awesome, thank you. So we now move on to the water regulator. No, we won't. We'll move on to Three Waters review, and Murray Washington will bring us up to speed on that.
Yeah, thanks, Murray. As David mentioned, we're not getting a lot of clarity out of the central government. There has been discussions that the number of projects put up for shovel-ready funding indicate that the sector has got a funding issue, and that acceleration of decisions around the Three Waters service delivery review should be undertaken. However, it is a wee bit of a confusing space at this stage. So and I'm involved in a group looking at the scoping application funding for Canterbury. We are now awaiting direction from the Mayoral Forum on the 22nd of May when what the future proposals may look like for Canterbury and further wide. So at this stage, confusing space, we'll react when we can react. Thanks, Murray.
Awesome. Thank you. So wastewater, we're just dealing with we've made changes to the report, and there doesn't appear to be any. Leaston flood bypass. Elaine?
Yep, so stage 3 of the works for the Leaston flood bypass, so that's around the High Street culvert and downstream connection, are currently being priced for construction. So this will delay construction slightly, as it's now likely to be a spring construction period. This is mainly due to entering the winter period and due to the issues with the procurement of key items. That's just been delayed through the manufacturing process during the COVID-19 shutdown period and the effect that that's had on the supply chain. In regards to stage 4, negotiations with landowners are still in progress, but moving forward.
Awesome, thank you. Horat, no change. Land drainage, I'll just say that we annual drain cleaning has recommenced during level 3 and continues to carry on in level 2. COVID-19 update, Murray, Washington, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I did. Look, we've come through level 4 and level 3 very well. We have been aided by a very benign late summer, early autumn. So we haven't had too many issues with the weather. The contractors worked well. Our staff have worked very well. And the services have carried on. Probably most consumers wouldn't have known any different in terms of service delivery during that period. In terms of resources moving forward, we are going to present to council in a report in June, looking at effectively a Section 17A review, which is a review of delivery of services with the view to considering extending the current SICON contract beyond its June 2021 date for expiry. So we will be putting that to council next month for your consideration. There is obviously other issues at play in respect to future water service delivery, and but it's a good time a year out to make some firm plans where we're heading. And that's all at this stage. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Murray and Lane. That was really helpful coming in and breaking up my voice. So that's our 5 waters report. If anyone had any questions, we're happy to answer those. And there's a lot of information there. So yeah, I'm happy to take questions now.
Thanks, Murray. And if you'd just stop screen sharing again, just so I can see everyone's faces, that'd be great. A couple of questions from me. Firstly, the overnight water use on your water graph was well down. Is there a reason for that, do you think? Is that around overnight commercial use, or yeah, what's the driver there?
Yeah, so it's not too dissimilar to what we see this time every year. Well, I had a look seasonally over a couple of years, and around this time we do see quite a significant drop in water use. So I believe it's more seasonal as opposed to COVID. However, once we go back to level 1, we can then confirm that assumption. But at this stage, the majority of that drop, at least, is seasonal.
Okay, and looking at that same graph, there were sort of peaks every hour or every half hour. Is that just us measuring, or is that people taking a drink every hour, or what is the driver there, that the sort of the U shape that happens at the top of all those graphs, whether it was pre or post COVID?
I'll have to look into that and give some more consideration. So the graph has been smoothed. I think it's in 20 minutes intervals, but we take snapshots of every sort of 5 seconds of the water supply. So we've got some very high resolution data of that. But yeah, I can't speak to why we're seeing that, but I'll look into that for the next report if you like.
Thank you. Thinking about water races, there's been a lot of ongoing discussion around the Upper Ellesmere water race scheme and its closure and permanent changes that needs to take place there. Just wondering if you're able to give the meeting an update as to where that work is at.
I can do. So in Council's long-term plan, the 2018 to 28 long-term plan, we signalled that we're looking at closing the Upper Ellesmere water race. So that's from the Koi River down to the State Highway. There's actually a second part of the Ellesmere race, which is below the State Highway, which we're not looking at changing at this stage, but the upper intake we are looking at shutting down. And the reason for that is because as Central Plains came through, a lot of the farmers in that area changed from dry land farming through to dairy input. There's a couple of steps we need to go through, close the race, and this will be a council initiated closure. The first step is to identify the long-term plan, which we've done. The second part is that we do have an agreement for third party for some of the races downstream. And so the council needs to work through that agreement to, I suppose, unravel ourselves from that before we can shut them down. And then lastly, we need to go out for public consultation, which is the final stage. So stage 1 we've done, it's in the long-term plan. Stage 2, which is to unravel ourselves from a third-party agreement, is currently underway, and that's likely to take a few months yet. It's not going to be a fast process. And then once that's been done, the rest of it should happen reasonably quickly, depending on ratepayer consultation outcomes.
Thank you. If you were able to include an update on that particular matter in future reports, I think it's of high interest to a number of our community and has large financial implications for people as well. So just some of that finer grain could come through in the reporting next time. That would be interesting.
Happy to do that.
Thank you. The Upper Selwyn Huts, you mentioned tampering with the supply. It's a really serious matter. Have the police been involved in that?
So the police were definitely there on the night of the incidents. I'm not sure, Murray or Lane, if you guys can comment any further. Murray, can you comment?
No, we know that the police were involved, but we haven't been given any details of what the follow-up was.
Okay, obviously we'll be supporting the police on whatever their investigations are, because it doesn't matter where that sort of thing happens. It puts a lot of people at risk, and that's unacceptable behaviour. And then lastly, just a question and a couple of comments, I suppose, around the Three Waters review. Murray Washington, thanks for the update that you gave us. I think it's fair to say that over the last 3 years, both this government and the previous government had suggested that Three Waters be taken from councils and pulled together on some other model that either looks like a region, a Super Rugby type franchise, an island, or across the whole of New Zealand as one grouping. And those murmurs out of government certainly haven't changed. And in some ways, the opportunity around COVID has been seen by ministers as a chance to make this change. That hasn't been helped by the number of councils that put forward Three Waters projects that they basically said they were unable to fund and were seeking extra government help on. So I guess I am just wanting to say thanks for keeping us up to date there. I think that what the current local government New Zealand position is that the water regulations changing and tightening, and that's all fine, that's good, but allowing local solutions, and which might include aggregation, but doesn't have to be mandatory aggregation, will allow for innovation in the sector. And in Selwyn, we've prided ourselves on a really low cost water supply and a really high quality water supply to people, and taking a risk-based approach to provide the safest water we can has also been part of our philosophy. So it's hard for us as a council to see the need for the government to push through these things. I know that other councils are in a different space, and unfortunately, if it was to happen, it would mean cost increases for us and our ratepayers in Selwyn, as our water is currently, what, 50 cents for 1,000 litres, one of the cheapest in the country. So we'll keep an eye on that space and where we track, but thank you for the update there. I have Councillor Alexander and Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The first of which is with respect to the water safety plans. You start on the top page 95 saying that we asked for an extension to submitting 23 water safety plans, and then further down that page you talk more about we're committed to submitting plans for Rolleston, Horata, Darfield and West Melton this year. Does that mean we've got 19 plans that we won't be submitting this year? And what's the implication and or legal penalties for not doing so?
So I'll leave Elaine to answer that question.
Yeah, that's not a problem, Murray. So originally the plan was to submit the 4 you mentioned there, and we'd asked for an extension on the remaining 23 plans. But that obviously hasn't happened. So now we will be submitting them all between now and July, or all the ones that are due between now and July. There are a couple of plans that still have 2 years to go, so they don't need to be submitted at the moment.
Thank you. My next question is with respect to the temporary chlorination. I mean, the removal of the chlorination was celebrated in Kirwee, and I'm sure will be in West Melton and Dunsandel, but did I hear you correctly and say that it was third-party operations in the water supply that have caused the contamination that has required the chlorination? If so, what are we doing about the people, the contractors presumably that are authorised to operate in that space, potentially causing these problems?
Apologies, maybe that wasn't clear. So we've got third parties undertaking investigations in both spaces.
Right.
Just because we need some additional expertise to work out the cause or the solution in each location.
So did we identify the cause at Kerwee, given that we've solved the problem?
Yep, there was some contamination in the reticulation supply. There was a few different points that were found that could have been the cause. I can't tell you exactly which one of them caused the issue, but we did fix a number of things throughout the network, and that solved the problem.
Was it, just off the top of your head, is it sort of a combination of maintenance as well as, was a suggestion that it could have been a third-party contractor connecting to the scheme that caused it?
From memory, what's been some of the works I've undertaken have mainly to do with backflow remediation on existing laterals. So it wasn't necessarily third party. Someone could have interfered with something that had been there, putting in an additional connection that we didn't know about, but now all the connections there have all the backflow protection that's required.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, Mark.
I was going to say, we look forward to the quick identification of the problems in the two other townships, because I'm sure they're looking forward to getting back to no chlorination too.
And I think that whole process just highlights the fragility of the service, and it's not just about, and the complexity. It's not just about a source being clean. It's not just about having new infrastructure on the ground. It's not just about having the outtakes, having backflow prevention devices. It's about all of that and more. And so the risk-based approach that we've taken, I think, considers all of those things: number of people that are connected, time that it's going to take to respond when there is an issue. And that'll be part of the report that you'll bring back to us when we consider Upper Selwyn Huts and Arthur's Pass later. So, Mark, thank you for raising those things. Got Councillor Lemon and then Councillor Mugford.
Thank you, Sam. I'm not sure whether it's Elaine or Murray will want to answer this, but just the stormwater bypass in Leeston. Murray, the old chestnut again. Obviously, stage 3 delayed for obvious reasons, and there'll be the usual concerns as expressed in your report around trying to operate in that sort of groundwater level. Spring's also not that wonderful usually, but it is an opportunity now for us to really engage meaningfully for stage 4. Obviously, the likelihood of a developer wanting to develop that land in the post-COVID environment economically may be reduced, so it's an opportunity for us to really engage positively with that landowner and use the connections of myself and Councillor Epihar to do that. And perhaps offline we can have a conversation about that and get that project moving. So yeah, just an offer. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Thanks, Murray. And Bob.
Yeah, just from Murray, where are we at with the Springfield reservoirs? Are they about to go ahead, or are we still under negotiations?
Yeah, yeah, I can have a go at that one. Lane, correct me if I'm wrong. So that project is being funded this year, and it's a priority for us as council to ensure we have safe water supply for the Springfield community. And what the purpose of the reservoirs is to provide us additional buffer once the river goes dirty, that we can have clean water stored there and to get us through that period. There is one landowner who has some opposition to that. But we're working through that, and this project in terms of investigations, design, construction is carrying on at this point.
Thanks very much. And lastly from me, just a question around Hororata stormwater. Murray's brought up the Leeston, and I think that's very important to continue for the community there. But also the Melbourne Community Board's obviously got an interest in and has been part of their discussions around Hororata works. Are you just able to briefly touch on where those works are at? Murray Washington.
Yeah, we're having weekly discussions on Hororata stormwater. Given when we went back into alert level 3, culvert work in Hawkins Road recommenced. There's quite a lot of activities going, including quite a bit of work with landowners and with ECAN around consenting. I'm catching up with Daniel on site on Friday just to go through the options to make sure we're all on the same page, and we're reporting back to the CEO on Tuesday. So all good, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and it will take some time.
Appreciate that, Murray. Thank you for the update. Do we have a mover and seconder to receive this report? Bob and Sophie. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Declare it unanimously carried. Elaine Murray, thank you very much for that and for bringing a comprehensive report to us today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
The next item is on pages 104 through 110, acquisitions, disposal and leasing officer. It's a service to notice of entry under section 111 of the Public Works Act for Prebleton intersection upgrades. And Bianca, if you'd like to talk us through this report.
Hi, Mayor Sam. Nice to see you all as well. So the report is pretty much as written, but happy to take any questions that you might have about the project or where it stands at the moment.
Thank you. Any questions from any councillors or comments? Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Lyle, seconded. Councillor Hassan, all those in favour, please raise your hand. Declare it unanimously carried. And Bianca, yep, great to see you online again. And Rob as well, thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you in the council building soon.
Excellent. Same to you. Take care.
So that's carried. We move on now to item number 10. It's pages 111 through 121, update on the Selwyn Community Grants Fund. And Denise, welcome along to the meeting. If you'd like to just talk about this report or any updates since it was written.
Kia ora koutou, Mayor Sam and councillors. As the primary purpose for tabling this report with councillors to meet our obligations as part of the policy on community funding, which requires regular reports to the full council on the expenditure. So that is one of the intents behind this report. The second pertains to a number of decisions that were made by the subcommittee of council in relation to decisions, and that was these decisions were made in December 2019 based on the October funding round. Subsequently, and over the period of COVID-19, we've had a number of recipients come back to us and say that they either were not able to deliver the project or the initiative that they had received funding for, or they no longer felt it was as appropriate as some other purpose. And so this report requests council can allow the subcommittee to receive counter proposals from funding that has been allocated within the budgets that have, within the amounts that have been allocated, to allow a change in what the funding is being spent on. And it also asks for us, the committees, to meet potentially fortnightly going forward as these requests are received, if necessary. And the third aspect of the report is to allow the subcommittee to increase the frequency of its meetings, and also to take a more a flexible approach in terms of what the funding is spent on in light of the changed circumstances resulting from the COVID-19 experience. And so asking the council to provide the subcommittee with some leeway to meet more frequently and to potentially fund somewhat flexibly outside of the guidelines currently set, in order to meet the opportunities or challenges that COVID-19 presents, and also proposes to report more frequently to the council in this regard.
Thanks for that, Denise, and good to see the flexibility shown to handle what is a changing situation at the moment, and great to hear that the community is also thinking about ways that they could spend money in a better way for their community rather than just locked into what was decided previously. Councillors, is there any questions, or do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Epeha, seconded McInnes. No questions. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And declare those three recommendations carried unanimously. Thank you, Denise, for that. Item number 11 is Senior Strategy and Policy Planner. It's pages 122 through 145. Oranga Tamariki residents, and there's 4 recommendations there.
Hi there. How's it going?
Jess, you're with us. Great. Hi.
Yes,
And Tim?
I'm online.
Cool. If you'd like to just highlight of this report, and then we'll proceed to any questions before moving and seconding.
Okay. So a request has been made to Council to alter the existing designation NS1, which is the Ministry for Children's Youth Justice Centre in Burnham, due to legislative changes that manage the operation and management of Oranga Tamariki facilities across the country. This alteration to the designation is required to enable the Minister for Children to achieve the purposes of the Oranga Tamariki Act. As outlined in the report, the alteration will result in changes to the planning maps, the designation purpose, the designation schedule, and will alter the wording of conditions 1 to 5 and result in the removal of conditions 9 and 10 of the existing designation. The Commissioner's report considers the relevant Resource Management Act provisions applicable to the proposed designation alteration. The effects of the proposed designation alteration will either be de minimis or less than minor. The application was not publicly notified and no consultation has been undertaken by Council, as there are no parties considered directly affected by the proposed designation alteration. In accordance with Section 181 of the Act, the Council has 2 options it can pursue. It can either, 1, accept the Commissioner's recommendation to allow the alteration to the existing designation of the district plan to proceed. This is the preferred option, as it is considered that the designation alteration satisfies the statutory requirements set out in Section 181 subsection 3 of the Resource Management Act. If Council decides to accept the Commissioner's recommendation, the district plan can be amended accordingly. Option 2 is that you may reject the recommendation. This would necessitate that the alteration following the process in terms of sections 168 to 179 of the RMA would need to go ahead, but that would include public notification of the application. So that's a brief summary. Any questions?
Thanks, Jess. Just thinking through, the Commissioner is appointed by us, and this is a process undertaken where we delegated that role to somebody else.
Yes, Dean Crystal, who works at Plans, was the Commissioner who provided the recommendation, which
Okay.
Council can either adopt or reject.
Great, thank you for that. Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. It was with quite a deal of interest that I read this report, because I was a member of the original Community Liaison Committee and for a term chaired the meeting. I was interested under the consultation paragraph in the report. It says that consultation included the wider community. Well, that is in fact an error in the report. The wider community was not consulted. The people who were consulted, when you look at the AEE report, were the neighbours, the Defence Forces and Corrections, the iwi, and the Community Liaison Committee. The Community Liaison Committee failed, in my view, in their function, in that they didn't consult the community which they represent. That includes both community and council members of the Community Liaison Committee failed to take this back to their communities to seek support. Now, I actually support the change in designation. What I do not support is the process. The Community Liaison Committee in particular failed and have continued to fail to consult the community which they represent. That is a really unfortunate situation, and it's very difficult to remedy, because there's no way of doing that under the regulations. Secondly, I don't believe we can adopt this report today. There is an error in the amended designation. There is a new purpose added of visitor accommodation, and yet the occupancy condition has not been amended to include visitor accommodation. So now we have 2 sides of the designation in conflict with each other. If Oranga Tamariki allow visitor accommodation on site, they are in breach of their occupancy condition. If they don't allow visitor accommodation, they're in breach of their purpose. So unfortunately, I do not believe that we can adopt this designation with this clear and obvious error in it. I'm very surprised that it got all the way through the consultation and a hearing and a decision with such a glaring mistake in it. And I guess to me, it says that if you'd asked somebody who'd been involved from the original time, they'd have seen this mistake, they'd have pointed it out, and it could have been fixed. But how can we fix his error now that a hearing has been held and closed and a decision written? The only way I can see that it can be fixed is it has to go back to another hearing to address the error. So I don't believe that council can adopt this today. I believe that council, originally I was going to propose that council should leave this on the table until it can be fixed. But in my view, it cannot be fixed without another hearing. So the only opportunity for council to address that is to decline to accept this new designation. Thank you.
Sorry, thanks, Mark. And Jess and Tim, I'll throw back to you at the end, and I'll just collect the questions and comments that councillors have before coming back to you. So Councillor Heston and then Councillor Epeha.
Reading this report and understanding where Councillor Alexander's actually coming from, I'd like to hear from staff how we can actually make clarification around the point of visitor accommodation issue that's actually alluded to in this particular report. I note that with regards to one of the changes or to the variation within the designation itself is that council will no longer, or council appointees will no longer be involved with the community liaison. It is up to the organisation itself to actually manage the consultation with the community. So that leaves the council out. And I'd just like to understand, was that variation, because I'm understanding, was not actually consulted on with the rest of the community with regards to that change. And I feel sort of aligned with Councillor Alexander with regards to questioning the process. So I'd like to hear from staff clarification around those particular issues, because it's, to my mind, it's not been a very good process with regards to transparency for those that live in the actual community area. And historically, the reason why this liaison committee was actually set up was to actually relay any fears that the community may have had with regards to the establishment of this designation by the requiring authority within the Rolleston area. So just like the feedback, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Epeha.
Kia ora. Thank you, Jess, Tim, for the report. I can only really speak to Councillor Alexander's comments around communication, and as the newly elected chair for the Community Liaison Committee, I think over the last couple of meetings we've had, there's been quite low numbers. Sophie and I have the representatives from council on that committee now, so moving forward I'm happy to work with council to open up some process of communication and feeding back. Thank you.
Thank you. It seems like a lot of the comments are based around the community liaison group and how people see its function and whether, in fact, as a group, their role is to do the consultation with the wider community, or whether they are actually the group that's pulled together to be able to feed back as a subsection of the community or as a representation themselves of the community to the organisation as it goes ahead. So some of that seems like it's outside this process and is something that needs to be addressed, but isn't directly related here. And I'd be interested, Tim and Jess, for your views on that, as well as the item that Mark brought up around, does this conflict with purpose? And if it does, is there any reason why we can or cannot move this today?
Good afternoon, councillors. Mayor Sam. Look, so I might just start and then hand over to Jess. I might just pick up the point that Mark.
Tim, sorry, before you do, Sorry, I didn't see Murray Lemon's hand up, and I just wonder if we get him to speak before we come to you, just then all the councillors have had a chance and you hear everything. Murray, did you want to say anything now?
Yeah, sorry, Sam, I just removed my hand. I was going to ask for clarification because it's quite an important matter. We need to understand where we go with this. So yes, apologies. I tried to get it down before you saw it.
Thanks. Okay, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Sam. I might just start with a point on visitor accommodation. To me, there isn't a conflict. The occupancy condition is around occupants, that is residents of the facility, not visitors. And I just think this reflects the operation of how the facility actually works, that some visitors do come to the site and I presume stay overnight when they're visiting their relatives or people who are actually in the site. So to me, the condition around occupancy is clearly that, around residents and not meant to pick up the overall anyone coming onto the site. So I don't necessarily see a clear conflict there. In terms of consultation, I might just say this is a existing facility that's got a designation in place. Obviously, this process has been a minor alteration. So the assessment of effects has determined that it's insignificant, and that's why it's gone through this particular process. There was not a hearing for this case. No one was deemed to be adversely affected, so it was just done on the papers, if you like, with a recommendation from a council officer, and then that was endorsed by the commissioner, and that's the report that you have in front of you this afternoon. In terms of consultation and the community liaison committee, I do think that is outside of this particular process, and it is something perhaps that the liaison committee needs to think about in terms of its own role and perhaps clarify that, but I don't think it's part of this particular role. So yeah, in summary, minor operation. The occupancy condition, to my mind, is around residents, not visitors, and the wording of putting the wording of visitor accommodation there just reflected the operational management of the facility rather than any change in direction of the operation of the facility. Now, just in terms of that, if that councillor still got some concerns around that, I would be loath to think that we would reject this particular recommendation this afternoon. There is another option. I believe we could leave it on the table, seek some clarification from the applicant, and then with that information, go back to the commissioner and see if he is happy with the recommendations, and then bring that back at a later stage. But to my mind, we don't need to do that. I think there's enough information on the table there, and I don't have any concerns. So with that, I might just pass over to Jess to see if she's got any further comments to make. Thank you, Mayor Sam, councillors.
I think you took the words out of my mouth. Just in regards to the process, that based on what the options are in the RMA, we sort of satisfied the threshold requirements to go through as an alteration on a non-notified basis, basically. And so that's, I guess, why there was no consultation with the public, because they weren't deemed to be directly affected. The reference to the wider community, I concede is probably an incorrect reference. It wasn't the wider community that was consulted, but it was some, I guess, neighbours that were informed of what was potentially happening before it happens. With regards to the visitor accommodation, I'd need to check the original designation that went through the process several years ago. The only way to see the original copy of the file is the boxes are sitting on my desk in the bunker, just to see why the decision was made around visitor accommodation versus residential activity, because at the moment in the operative district plan, the definition of residential activity includes some forms of visitor accommodation and excludes custodial accommodation. So it could have been for those reasons that at the time the definition wasn't suitable. So we definitely will check with the applicant to see what their intentions are. See some questions.
Thank you, Jess. I've got Councillor Hassan, Alexander and Lyle.
Thanks for the clarification. Look, when any decision has to come through, that has to be written clearly so no one can be ambiguous about how they interpret a condition of a consent, a designation, etc. It has to be quite clear in everybody's mind. What's highlighted here, thanks Jess, is historically we don't have all the information in front of us. We don't fully understand how it came about, and given that it just may need a minor amendment, as Tim has said, to go back to the Commissioner, but I really think we need to go back, do the research, understand the process, a bit like Hansard in law. So we're quite clear as to why the original condition was put in like that, and if a change is actually suitable. So I guess at the end of the day, I'm actually quite prepared to let this lie on the table and that process to actually be undertaken and a report back to us, because it's very important that this is a legal process. We need to have done our due diligence with regards to understanding the history, the clarification, and where we are going forward. So I'd let there's other people wanting to speak, but I just want the clarification with regards to this being a legal process.
Thanks, Deborah. Councillor Alexander, and then Councillor Lyle.
Can I let Councillor Lyle speak first, please?
Sure. Councillor Lyle.
Yeah, well, on the contrary, I myself believe that we have employed an independent commissioner to do a role which they have undertaken. Our staff are happy with the role and the way in which that has come out. We are now in a position where we have people trying to second guess and what the consultant has provided for us in a report, and I would like to move the recommendation.
Thanks, Malcolm. Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Epiha, thank you. And Councillor Alexander.
Thank you. I can explain to staff, I suspect the reference to visitor accommodation has come about from the change legislation. I was involved as a community board member and a member of the receiving community in the original designation. Visitor accommodation was specifically excluded because there was considerable community angst that we may have visitors staying on site. So it was a specific exclusion from the designation at that point. And I do believe, along with in the lines of Councillor Hassan, that this should be left on the table to get a clarification for this. It can come back at a subsequent council meeting. It's not dramatically urgent. I disagree with Councillor Lyle. Our role as a council is to scrutinise these reports and not merely to be a rubber stamp for commissioners. That is in fact a very poor interpretation. And so I will move the procedural motion that this report lie on the table until we've had a clarification around the accommodation and occupancy issue.
Thanks, Councillor Alexander. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded, Councillor Lemon. So there's, as we're discussing now, whether this lays on the table. If it does, we will seek that clarification that has been requested and will be brought back to a subsequent meeting. If this doesn't lie on the table, we'll move it today as moved by Councillor Lyle, and it won't come back to a subsequent meeting and will be included as in our report. So all those in favour that it lay on the table seeking further information, please raise your hands. 1, 2, I've got Councillor Hassan, Reid, Alexander, Lemon and Bland. And yes, that's 5. And all those against it laying on the table and continuing today, please raise your hands. 1, 2, I've got Councillor McInnes, Councillor Mugford, Councillor Epiha, Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Lyle and myself. So declare that defeated. And we now move to remain as it was, moved by Councillor Lyle and seconded by Epiha. All those in favour that we resolve to adopt the Commissioner's recommendation to allow minor alterations B, C and D, please raise your hands. And I've got Councillor McInnes, Mugford, Epiha, Gallagher, Lyle and myself. And those against, please raise your hands. Got Councillor Hassan, Reid, Alexander, Lehman and Blands. Declare it carried. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Hassan.
Yes.
Sorry, Deborah, you're on mute.
Sorry. I know it's a bit difficult being on Zoom, but with regards to standing orders, if someone requests that an item lie on the table, with regards to your decision of actually taking a vote on that, can I have a ruling, please, that is within the jurisdiction of due process, given that it was asked to lie on the table? Just want to understand. Thank you.
Mr. Ward.
Yeah, look, I can give you that, but not at the moment. I'll need to research that. I don't have a copy of standing orders in front of me, Mr. Mayor, but I can check that when we break in a few moments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lehman.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I'm not revisiting the decision at all, but just for the point of clarity, we've got two members on that committee who have been criticised for their actions or inactions. I think it's a little unfair to beginning councillors assigned to a committee to expect to understand how that operates right from the outset. So it's a timely reminder to us all that we need to support these people, not attack them in this environment, and make sure that they do understand, as we all needed to do, the roles that they serve. So it's probably a good opportunity for us to, at a different format and venue and time, to seek some clarification about what their roles are.
I wasn't criticising the new members. It was the previous liaison committee prior to the 2019 election. So I have no criticism of the current two councillors on the liaison committee. And if the implication was that I was criticising them, I apologise.
Thanks, Mark, for that.
I take that, Mark. And what I shouldn't have put it that way. That an apology. What I'm saying is that the current people on there need to have our support, not it may be taken that way in the public environment we're operating today.
Thank you. And it can be noted that both Epiha and McInnes supported that going through today. So thank you, Jess and Mr. Harris, for reporting that to us. We now move on to item number 12, which is Strategy and Policy Planner, pages 146 through 153, Plan Change 61 in Darfield. Ben Beard.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. Thanks, councillors, Mayor Sam. This report's just a procedural report for the Plan Change 61. That's located east of Darfield, 30 hectares, a mix of industrial and residential. The report's just about whether there is enough information there for us to proceed. It's not a discussion of its merits at the time. After this, it's for notification. And then, yeah, we'll just work on a process to bring in this to align this with the district plan whenever those kind of two processes need to be aligned. So yeah, any questions?
Great. And Ben, just for clarification, there's three options with this. We could either adopt it as our own plan change and run the process. We accept it as a private plan change and let them run the process and obviously the costs with it, or we would reject this and seek further information from them today. Those are the three options available to us.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Alexander, Epiha and Lemon.
Thank you. I support this being a private plan change. However, I would note, concern in mind would be the lack of connectivity of the residential portion of the subdivision to the rest of the township. There's no way that you could have a child cycling or walking from this subdivision to the township. But otherwise, I do support it, going out for consultation.
Thank you. And the other hands have been lowered. Ben, have you got any comment on that distance stuff? I guess that gets picked up through the process.
Yeah. That it's not. We're not looking at the merits of this and all those kind of potential issues. It's just that can be sorted out in their submission kind of notification time.
Thank you, Ben, for that. Do I have a mover and a seconder for this? Moved Councillor Lyle, seconded Councillor Hassan. All those in favour, please raise your hands and declare that unanimously carried. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
We move on to item number 13, Register of Documents Signed and Sealed, page 154 through 155. And there are 10 items on that list. I have a mover and seconder that be done, Gallagher and Mugford. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Declare that unanimously carried. And that brings us to a resolution to exclude the public. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that? Mugford and Hassan. And all those in favour, please raise your hands. Declare that unanimously carried. I want to say thank you to the public that have been with us today and watched and taken an interest in the decisions that your councils made. And thank you for giving up your afternoon or taking that interest and actually following here. Just here enjoying the last day under level 3 and looking forward to level 2 tomorrow in Nohora. And we'll just see everyone else back for the PX part of this meeting at 3:15. Thank you.
Kaki Deb.